Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a lovely day doing studio visits. I'm really sorry Asma is not here because she's the one who invited me and somebody I worked with in the past, and so I really wanted to thank her personally because we've never actually met, but I guess it's not going to happen. The talk I'm going to give is about some work I've been doing in the last 2-3 years. I apologize for the title. I think it's awful, but I felt it was really apt because, of course, I think the mirror is a really nice metaphor for the anthropology process, and a lot of the work that I do as a curator in the different art communities and cultures I work in is very anthropologically oriented, whether or not people like that. And I think it's a very kind of a problematic thing, to especially within an arts context, to address a local culture maybe with a mirror that might be met with resistance. And I'll kind of touch on that, what I mean by that a bit. But essentially, I don't know. I thought the mirror was a very apt metaphor. This was my alternative title. Because I think this idea of participatory anthropology is kind of based on that, right? It's a field that's a little underexplored. It's something that maybe brings to mind Carlos Castaneda, who's the person who was the anthropologist who became the shaman. He kind of drank his own Kool-Aid and went through the shamanic process and came out the other side. And so with participatory anthropology, it's been this problem in how it's dealt with academically because it's this loss of subjectivity or loss of objectivity due to subjective experience, and so the way I'm going to talk about that is kind of looking at a couple of different strategies, cultural strategies that come through in different exhibitions. I look at the exhibitions and the work that I do as case studies. I mean, I work in the art world, but I think the art world is a foil or is a way for me to access another world or another audience. A lot of the work that I've done, I'm currently curator at Gagosian Gallery, which is obviously a very particular context, top of the market, etc. Oddly, they let me do pretty much whatever I want to do there. I do a lot of the group shows that you would have seen in the last 2 years in LA, but also at the other satellite locations. I do all my work anonymously, which is of course, I'm going to take credit for it here, but generally I like that, in terms of how it's mediated, because that's a very problematic thing to relinquish authorship, and so it kind of makes it seem like there's this kind of corporate entity that's coming up with these schemes, and so yeah, what else to say? This image, I love this image. It's from Jean Cocteau's film Orpheus from 1950, and it's a great moment of early Hollywood special effects. Orpheus has a number of moments in the film where he passes into the underworld, and he does that by passing through the mirror. And Cocteau set up a number of moments of that action, which was really difficult in the early 50s. And this is actually the actor putting his hand into a pool of mercury, which is highly toxic, and so you can tell he's actually wearing a glove. But it's beautiful. I mean, you can't beat that. That's analog. And so this is another moment in the film where you have, of course, it's a bad play on gravity. The work I do, I think, well, my curatorial work starts in 2007. I went to Berlin, and I had been a journalist for Flash Art. I was the editor of Flash Art in Milan for 2 years, and I had never trained in journalism. I never trained in anthropology either. But I think these are hats that we can wear if you figure out how to speak the language well enough. And so I tried to take that very serious, and people took me very serious as a journalist. And so I worked quite extensively around Europe as a cultural journalist, and in particular in Eastern Europe. And so then when I went to Berlin, it was a matter of thinking about exhibitions almost journalistically. That was my first point of entry, because I felt that was really a way to make a coherent statement, and an investigation and a research. And so a lot of the work that I do came out of a journalistic interest in particular topics. But for the purpose of this talk, the conversation really starts with this exhibition here. This is the invite for it. This is an image of Donnell Wolford, who's an African-American artist who's gotten famous recently from her participation in the Whitney Biennial, and 2 or 4 years ago. And this was the image for the invite of a show I did called The Practice of Everyday Life, which was quite obviously based on the book of Michel de Certeau. And that was a book that I based my thesis on in grad school, and it was one of the first most applicable texts I had found as a student. And then suddenly it's really defined my practice in a way. I've never even read the whole book, I'll be honest with you. But the first third of it I found particularly useful. Particularly this conversation around bricolage and thinking about cultural strategies. And the way, de Certeau talks about bricolage, and of course it's caveman science ultimately. We as human beings have basic needs that we need to satisfy, and we do that through functional interventions in our daily life. And so that is a formula that you can just apply across the board anywhere. And so de Certeau gives, while a lot of what de Certeau is doing in that book, particularly in the first third of the book, is trying to explain the rules of contemporary man and contemporary society, and in doing so, kind of empower us into taking these rules and using them actively to reclaim our position of power within a social structure. And that leads to this idea, which I thought was totally fascinating, called la perruque, which is the wig. And so the wig is an idea he proposes, which we're all actively very engaged in. It's like, looking like you're listening to me kind of thing. It's a theater of social behavior that we, where we imagine the office, a lot of people typing away on their computers, and then to the boss it looks and is consumed as if there's productivity happening, but we're all surfing Facebook or whatever. But it's based on a pure kind of behavioral situation. We are doing what we seem to be doing. And so that for me became very interesting in thinking about an exhibition. I never really identified with relational aesthetics. I thought that was a kind of a weird idea that was really pushed on us in school, and it was like kind of like some like bourgeois social ritual shit where it's like pretending to dance or something. And I was more interested in how artists were actually appropriating professions, the languages of professions, the languages of production and consumption, and actually replicating them to produce and have consumed those things that might seem exactly like what they're pretending to be. So goods and services and commercial exchange and what have you. Somebody pretending like they're a civic worker who's changing light bulbs in the street is seen by everyone as somebody doing the civic duty. But then, it's all recorded on video, and in the art space, it becomes this weird social intervention. So there's this bifurcation of audience that takes place where you have the consumer who is consuming what they believe to be the thing that they are seeing, and then of course then there's this art audience who's like in on the joke, if you will, who's actually understanding it as a performance. So it transforms from being a good and a service to like a performance and a sculpture. But what happens for me, I think, is starting to think about exhibitions as recursive structures, rather than making. I have a problem with a lot of the way in which exhibition structures work, because I think there's this weird passive dominance that happens between the viewer, or even the curator, and the subject or object on display. And I find that it's pretty boring, and it's actually it makes it to where I think the White Cube or the art gallery is maybe the last place we can have an authentic experience, because we're so geared towards self-consciously having one, and so it becomes a strange theater of that inhibits an authentic seeing of something, especially in contemporary reality, when we're going to end up knowing what we're going to see ages before we're actually going to see it. I think when I grew up in the art world in the early 2000s, opening the door of a gallery was a fucking mystery, and you never knew what you were going to get until you walked inside. And now it's like we're pretty well versed in what we're about to see. I hope that doesn't sound cynical. So I started being interested in this idea of recursivity and trying to make and complicate the idea of a subject and actually turn it in on itself and make it this condition of its own creation rather than just a representation. And so this show was a particular example of that. I'm not going to go into much more detail of it. This is just the performance. Well, this is the opening. But we had a performance at the opening that we didn't announce until the next day. An artist, David Levine, who, if you saw Sora Mahebi's show at Red Cat recently about discourse, David had a performance piece in it. And David was one of my artists that I represented. I had a gallery. That's my gallery. We represented 9 artists, but it was mostly group shows that we did. And I like this idea of constantly reinterpreting an artist's practice within a different context. It showed a kind of versatility. And at the opening, we had this performance where David trained, and through kind of method acting workshop, 2 people to be 2 other people. So basically to just be people at the opening. We had a girl who was going to be her boyfriend, who was hard of hearing in his right ear and extremely shy. And we had this guy who was going to be his friend, who was studying abroad in Berlin and studying financial stuff, and was super insecure and super chatty. And so he took on all these qualities. And so big deal, right? Because, I mean, how are you going to mix in with people, especially in the art world, who are going to be a bit funny about newcomers? And so what I did was created a story that I knew them from days or weeks prior, and they just came as a courtesy to the opening, and then I would introduce them to 2 very close friends of mine who are going to give anybody that I introduce them to some courtesy time. And at least 5 minutes or something, get to know you, how you been, how you finding Berlin, yada yada. And so then what happened was then these people would then get passed on and passed along through the crowd, and it actually worked. But nobody knew that it was a performance until the next day we announced that there were 2 fake people at the opening. And then it made this audience who was the privy audience of the joke, suddenly the actual kind of control group. And it made them question all their conversations with people they didn't know as potentially being fake. So that's the kind of I think a nice meta entry to the strategies that kind of start to get more complex in what I'll talk about. I'll just go through a range of exhibitions. Hopefully this isn't boring already. This is where I used to work before I came to LA. It's the Utah Museum of Contemporary Art in Salt Lake City. And it was a very exciting experience because it's obviously a very special place, Salt Lake City, for all its religious conditions and kind of aesthetics of repression and very particular idealization of what the art experience should be. I worked in a museum that had a very ambitious program where we were doing 15 shows a year, 3 in this space that you see here, which is an enormous space. And all for $84,000. So it was a fantastic opportunity to split pennies in half and figure out what you could do with it, especially in a place that's very difficult to bring art to. And so I'll just run through a spectrum of the shows I made in this space. This is an exhibition called Battleground States, which was about which happened during an election year. Or 4 years ago, and it was about looking between gender duality and trying to think about this idea of a third space. And it was doing that through figuration. You had to kind of take these, it was important in Utah to enable people's visual literacy because you can't expect anybody to know the history of art and all the kind of whatevers of that inside story. I think you need to obviously find new modes of entry that enable, liberate, and empower everyday people's visual literacy to make so they come into these spaces and feel empowered, and not like they need to know the joke or read the book. So this was a show about figuration, the idea of rendering a figure and all the kind of social political dimensions of that. And it was a great show. I mean, Salt Lake City has a very and a huge LGBT community, and and so so it was a great opportunity to kind of tap into that audience. It was also a great chance for me to try to make an exhibition like this. I had a whole roster of some of the most important LGBT artists from art history. This is another show called Cantastoria, which means history singer, and it was a kind of a meta show about the whole practice of, I mean, I think every artist starts off trying to tell a story. So it was a show that was about trying to kind of connect the technologies and materiality of storytelling from like Homer to Twitter. And so it had like camps of like news media, material witnesses was one that was like thinking about photography or the idea of the material kind of as a witness, and languages, and I'm gonna forget the other one, but anyways, yeah, Cantastorias. It had actual Cantastoria situations. This was my stab at post-internet art. This was a show called Analogical, which was looking at this idea of the space between analog and digital, and maybe as a generational phenomenon. I think of myself as coming from this analogical generation of people that grew up in the analog world and stumbled their way into the digital world. You know, the first generation of people that suddenly had computers in their everyday life, and of course then the internet, and the way that, you know, first-hand experience has been overtaken by second-hand experience through social media and so forth. So I thought it was a real opportunity to explore language of social, cultural evolution that was very active and happening. But also, you know, and it had like this nice dimensions of like how the analog world is looking at the digital and the digital looking at the analog, and so on. Had this nice binary structure of black and white. And again, structuring it around Utah. The cultural specificity of Utah was very important. Because this is like a really international topic. It had international artists. I mean, I did have 2 interesting Utah artists in the show, 3 technically. The third was the interesting one that I linchpinned the whole show around, which is the Utah Teapot. Many people probably don't know that Salt Lake City is the Silicon Valley of the Mountain West, and companies like EA Games, Adobe, and even Pixar all started there, and some of them still have their home base there. And so I'm like, duh, this is like so naturally the show that comes out of this place. But the earliest experiments in virtual reality are happening at the University of Utah. If you look up early VR tests online, you'll see these really shitty polyhedronic sort of hands, you know, moving, or like face, you know, moving back and forth. And those are at University of Utah. And but what the breakthrough moment, the real uncanny valley moment, is the Utah Teapot, where you have this guy, whose name I'm not going to remember, sitting there at his desk, kind of bored one day, and just sees his Melita teapot, and is like, I could draw that, and I'm sure it can render better than anything we've been doing. And so he just graphed it out on his on whatever paper they would use to then plot it out then on the computers at the time, and it was suddenly, that was it. You know, it was like a breakthrough. There's no distinguishing this between this and analog reality. And what's fascinating about the Utah Teapot is it's one of the earliest viral memes, in a way. It's an early viral icon that guy, whose name I'm not going to remember, goes and then faxes his data sheet to all the other universities that are dealing with the same, you know, kind of experiments in VR. And so suddenly you had all these people dealing with the Utah Teapot in their respective locations, you know, pre-internet. And so, you know, it's a real nerdy reference that you see thrown into, you know, the background of a Simpsons episode about VR or the lawnmower man. And it's not a totally celebrated thing. It's like a real insider joke. But the Utah Teapot, you know, is from Utah. So, anyways, that was that show, and then this show is the really, I think, the best thing I did there. That was the one and only Utah Biennial. They decided not to continue it after I left, and it was called Mundo Utah, and Mundo Utah is a book by the filmmaker Trent Harris, who is most famous for his film The Beaver Trilogy. And it's a fantastic film. It's the first moment of, I believe, recursive filmmaking, where you have the same, like what you saw with your Psycho screening recently of Hitchcock and then that guy meticulously remaking Hitchcock's angle for angle. Trent, well, I'm not going to explain it too much, but Trent made a kind of this kind of a reference of the reference of the reference of his own film in the early 70s. And it's the first film that Sean Penn appears in before he's famous. And Sean Penn's the reason this film is not circulated, because he would threaten to sue Trent if he had ever professionally released it. So it's only, you find it only on YouTube. Trent is like a gonzo anthropologist in Utah. He wrote this book called Mundo Utah, which is all kind of crazy stories of the culture there. Utah, probably everybody knows it because of it's the seat of Mormonism, and it's just an incredibly beautiful place. Salt Lake City is like 3/4 surrounded by mountains, and then there's the Salt Lake, and it's an incredible landscape. Culturally, I've never been to such a specific culture in my whole life, and I hadn't lived in America in 10 years before going back to America and Salt Lake City in particular. I came from Berlin, so that was quite a nice transition, and because of Mormonism, you have this kind of, like I said, the aesthetics of repression. We think about Paul McCarthy. Paul McCarthy was a Mormon. Most people don't know that. And he was married in the temple. It's so obvious that he was a Mormon when you think about his practice now. But the whole thing with Mormonism there is it creates this polarization because you're either Mormon or you're not. I mean, Mormons refer to non-Mormons as Gentiles, and non-Mormons are like, I'm definitely not Mormon. Can't you tell by my throat tattoos? And so it's there is no gray in Salt Lake City at all, and therefore there's no clear narrative of sorts. It's everyone's telling a different story, and it has I kind of figured out maybe like 7 or 8 art histories that were worth addressing. If I was going to do the Utah Biennial, I wanted to think about the biennial scientifically, because biennials are typically going to be this kind of hipsterish thing of the newest thing by the youngest or the contemporary artist or something. But because this was this first biennial, I thought it could be an awesome opportunity to make like a table of contents for future biennials, so address these worlds, these art worlds of Utah, these cultural vernaculars that are each in and of their own rights valid. And which you have the LDS Church claiming its own art history, BYU in Provo creating contemporary artists with through their faith, and my museum, the Utah Museum of Contemporary Art, trying to play an angle of international contemporary art, which was previously the Salt Lake Art Center, which was a collecting institution, a regional, local collecting institution. So there were all these different potential stories to tell, and then there's of course then the contemporary art history story of the place, like of Smithson's Spiral Jetty, Nancy Holt's Sun Tunnels, Paul McCarthy, and what you see there on the left is the Tumbleweed Tower from Johnny Pettina. He's a radical architect from Italy, working at the same time as Super Studio and Archizoom and everyone we think of when we think of radical architecture. He was the kind of the academic or historian voice of them, but he was also an artist architect in his own right. And he made his best work in Salt Lake City. No one in Salt Lake City had ever heard of him. So what was interesting about that was that when you go there, you realize this aesthetics of repression is like a weird cultural condition that's maybe cyclically sweeping shit under the rug every couple of years. And so you as an outsider can come and just pick up this very thin rug and find these awesome skeletons in the closet that are like moments in history that people don't even remember. That are like, no one knew really who Trent Harris was. When I was moving to Salt Lake City, Constant Dillard, a friend of ours, was like, dude, you got to look up Trent. You got to find him. And that was the first thing I did. Is I contacted Trent, and then some Italian friends of mine were like, Johnny Pettina. It was like this thing. Internationally, people think of Salt Lake City. They think of these two figures, and locally they're anonymous. But here, just to kind of like show some of the spectrum, the intensities of the spectrum I was dealing with. This rainbow stripe here is a social justice tabling project from Andrea Bowers. And Andrea had a moment in Salt Lake City. She was an artist in resident at the University of Utah. She created a gallery there. I think she had a really strong influence on this cultural community, and it is one that's like I said, it's very polarized. I mean, it's super intense, and so the idea of her doing a social justice table in that context was ideal. I mean, it's the most amazing portrait you could imagine. I thought each one of these projects became microcosmic portraits of the place. And this project ended up being the one that people were fucking raging about, like totally pissed. Like, what? My trustees were like, "Why are you bringing this stuff in here?" You know, I thought they were going to be pissed about what I'm going to show you next, but this was the one that was like really the problem. You know, like there's like pro-choice stuff on that table there. You know, how can you do that to this museum? You know, I'm like, what? It's like, dude, this is a mirror. This is who we are. But I, for the sake of, again, a real spectrum, our art world, as much as it's this kind of like all-encompassing, the democracy maybe of languages that are being produced in culture, it's really not. It's a wedge, a small, tiny little wedge of the probable reality. And that was particularly evident in Salt Lake City because we don't talk about God, and there's like half, if not more, of the United States, if not the world, is dealing with the aesthetics, with an aesthetic practice that's going to reference God. The contemporary art world doesn't do that at all. It's embarrassing to bring up God. And so this was an awesome opportunity to really deal with the spectrum. But you know what else never comes up is the right wing. We don't address right-wing politics whatsoever in contemporary art. This is the Tea Party's artist. His name is John McNaughton. He's the most famous artist to the Republican right. He's their Andy Warhol. This dude is from Provo, Utah. He is on the wall of every gas station throughout that state. And he's bought by Glenn Beck and Sean Hannity. Provenance, it's important. And this is a painting that I showed that you actually see right next to the Andrew Bowers works. Andrew Bowers' piece leads, which is ultra left wing, leads right into the ultra right wing of John McNaughton. And he does, if you couldn't tell, allegory painting, photorealistic allegory painting. This one is called Obama Nation, and we're really going to miss him. This is all the things that Obama has to celebrate in terms of destroying the country. There's, and whatever. You should go on to John McNaughton's website. It's fantastic because what he is not shy about is information, and it's very information heavy. He'll tell you every single angle of the allegory that he's dealing with. I met him. He's an incredibly sweet person. He's just really playing up Tea Party anxiety aesthetics. And he's one of these artists like Thomas Kincaid that never shows the real thing. It's always Giclées. He's got a gallery in the Provo Mall, and they sell posters and Giclée paintings. And I'm the first person to ever get him to show his real paintings, which was a real honor. And then next to him, I had this, which is Summum. Summum is, I think it's unfair to call them a cult, but that's probably the easiest way to classify them. They are, Mormonism is one of the most democratic of religions. Joseph Smith designed a religion that allows all of its adherents to potentially be directly in touch with God. That's why it's called the Latter-day Saints. It's all the contemporary saints. We're all potentially saints, and we're all potentially able to be in direct contact with God and the earpiece of God. And so that's a thing. Like, you, as a devout Mormon, are often waiting for the word. And it's usually the most devout that don't get it. They're usually the ones waiting to hear it and the hardest and longest. And it's very likely to be people who have schizophrenia or some desperate situation in their life that causes them to suddenly hear a voice ring exactly how they wanted it to. And that's how fundamentalism, Mormon fundamentalism, or FLDS is born. You have people that are hearing the word of God better than the church itself, and so they go out and create splinter organizations. And so Summum is an example of that. It was started by a guy named Corky Raw, who was visited by, that's not his real name, he changed his name. He was visited by an alien in the early 70s, a netter is what it's called, which was an intermediary between higher supreme beings, and told Corky to go forth and create a religion that was the sum total of religions, and which was summum. They do all their rituals inside of a pyramid off the highway, right near where I was living. The thing that summum is famous for is mummification. Cats and dogs are their bread and butter, which you see there. But they do people too, and that's the idea. You know, they do wet mummification, where the Egyptians did dry mummification. So they have a special material that they soak the body in for 77 days, and after that, kind of wrap it in lanolin and linen, or whatever the fabric is, gauze, and then seal it in a kind of concrete sand kind of sarcophagus. And the idea is that the body is wet and ready to go for reanimation, or the DNA is fresh and ready to go if you want to pull a sample and make some clones. But they look at dying or the body as a kind of in a state of transference, like just passing from the next to the next life. And so they're just preserving the body for that purpose. And they have their own cultural language. The paintings on the wall are paintings of their netters. The insurance value on these things was crazy. The paintings you can't see very well, and I don't have better images, but these are life masks that they made, which Corky died in 2008. He lost a Supreme Court battle, and I think that was too much for his heart, and he died. And when you go into Summum, they have meetings on Wednesdays at 7:30 if you're interested. And when you go there, you are next to Corky's body. He's in a sarcophagus, in a kind of a Tutankhamun kind of sarcophagus, all gold, and it's now a matriarchal religion run by Sue Menu, not her real name. She's a piano teacher by day and the leader of this group that claims to have 500,000 followers by night, and I only saw 5. Anyways, this is a thing that they made that they allowed me to show, which is life masks, not death masks. So that's Sue Manu and Bernie on the right. Sue Manu on the left and Bernie on the right. You should go on their website. It's a rabbit hole. These people have it's early website technology, so it's fantastically nostalgic for that alone. But it's like got all these trapdoors, and you just are led through this whole fucking culture that these people created. It's fantastic. Am I going on already too long? It's 30 minutes, and I feel like I've hardly started. We're okay, right? Everyone's okay? Is this? Yeah. So the last point, and then I'll start to skip through fast. This is Bigfoot. I found him. This is when I arrived in Utah to take on this position, everyone told me this story like a folklore. And I think that's really the key point about this exercise with the Johnny Petina Tumbleweed Tower, a thing that no one knew about, but it's in all these books. John McNaughton, and even Summum, and now this. These are very folkloric entities in this place. They are, of course, cultural ones, but the way they work, in a society where people are kind of denying their existence, they're kind of word-of-mouth entities. Folklore and the reenactment of folklore became a very interesting possibility there. And so when I arrived there, everyone told me this story that this is where Andy Warhol did his fake lecture here, and this is where he got caught. And I was like, oh, really? And it was a whole thing. And if you look up, Warhol's history, it's this, it's this thing that's not really dealt with, where Andy Warhol did a university tour in 1967, and he sent a surrogate instead of himself, and nobody knew about it until Salt Lake City, and it was this thing that weirdly. It was like everyone knew the story, but no one knew really the details of it. So like everyone would say, "Oh, this is where he got busted," blah blah blah. I was like, "So who was it?" And like, I don't know. And so I took it as an opportunity to figure it out, and figure out the story completely.
And it wasn't much research before you find out it's this guy, Alan Midget, or Midget. And he's there online. He was in the factory, and he was somebody that, and he was in a couple of films of Andy Warhol's, some of those shitty early films. And Andy always thought he was a better looking version of him. And so he would send him out to, he first sent him to Rochester to do a talk there with Paul Morrissey. And they did it, you know, you know, the whole idea was that they were going to show a film, do some Q&A, and bounce. And it was great. It was a total success. And so Andy then set up a university tour. So it went from being this thing where Andy didn't want to go to Rochester, send Alan, he'd be great, give him a wig, and then he went, and it worked great. And then Andy self-consciously organized a university tour now. And so this is where I think it's amazing in terms of the human being as ready-made, and thinking about Andy Warhol's practice, wanting to be a robot, all that stuff, where he actually sent this person in his place. I mean, it's fantastic. And in Salt Lake City, the Daily Bee, or whatever the thing was called, the newspaper at the University of Utah, was in anticipation of this talk, was publishing all these articles talking about what a fraud, what a scam, what a bunch of bullshit Andy Warhol is. This is not art. This is taking advantage of us, and Emperor's New Clothes, blah, blah, blah. So by the time this guy arrives, they were ready to be disappointed. They were ready to hate him. And he didn't disappoint. You know, he was pretty boring. You know, and he showed a film, did a couple of Q&As, and then left. But it wasn't until a year later, with persistent kind of effort from the journalist, that they realized that it was fake, and they got Paul Morrissey to admit it, that it was fake, and they were almost about to sue the factory, and came to some sort of agreement. Everyone wanted their tickets refunded. I mean, this was a whole year later that they unmasked this thing. And so I was like, I need to find this guy. I need something that represents this story tangibly there in this show. And so I found a couple of websites he was on. I wrote to the webmasters and got nothing. And then I found an interview with him from, this was 2012, or no, this was 2013. I found an interview from 2006 that was with him. And I contacted the writer, and I asked, hey, I'd like to get in touch with Alan. Can you give me his details? And she wrote me back. She was like, no, he doesn't have a phone. This dude lives off the grid. He doesn't have an email. He doesn't even have an address. You know, I was like, oh. But you fucking met him, you know, can you throw me a bone here? Like, you met him. Like, something, anything, come on. And she was like, I mean, it's a small community up there. You could probably just send a letter to, you know, the zip code and it'll work out, you know. And so I wrote a letter to a zip code. And 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from Alan Midget. And this was an incredible person. He's like a witness to history. This dude has an eidetic memory of what everyone was wearing and eating on any given day in the late 60s. I interviewed him over and over on Skype, and then and what I did was I got out of him all the details of his Q&A, experiences that he had in the different appearances that he made. And these were, oh, sadness, my little mic fell. These were questions like, what do you know about color theory, Andy? Are you gay? They were very much questions of their time, but they were questions of resistance and you know, and total kind of suspicion. So what I did was I flew him out for the opening of the biennial. We produced photos of him as Andy that were taken when people believed it was him. We found objects that he had carried with him as kind of props or artifacts of his experience as Andy, and flew him out. And it was amazing. The dude's like almost 80, and he just totally looks like Andy Warhol. And he, I had the theater completely full of people, and I showed the film that he showed, which was this awful Bayer aspirin commercial that was like 40 minutes long, which I showed like 20 minutes of it, but it was just irritating footage from the factory. And I showed the same film though, and then
turned it off, and I was like, and everyone please welcome Andy Warhol. And people just lost it. Because some people knew that it was going to be this guy, but there's a lot of people that didn't know Andy Warhol was dead. And so it was fucking brilliant, you know. And so I brought him out there, and what I did, which no one knew, is I planted these questions in the audience, all these same questions from his original Q&A, and I planted them with people that were like the snarky art history professor from the University of Utah, or the Trent Harris, the cult filmmaker, you know. And so I was like, you know, Andy Warhol, thank you so much for coming out here. It's really an honor and pleasure to have you. I guess I want to kind of turn this over right away to the audience. Let's ask some questions, you know, from the people, because I think they're all dying to ask you things. And all these hands went up, and I had an order that I was going to go through and asking these questions, or allowing these questions to be asked. And so, you know, it was the art history professor asking, what do you know about color theory? And, you know, and everyone's like, what? That's Monty. He's like an asshole. You know, he's going to like completely rip this dude apart or something, right? And he's asking about, what does he know about color theory? And then I asked Trent, and then Trent Harris, you know, and Trent's like, how do you make an underground film? You know, and he's the underground filmmaker. Like he's asking, how do you make and so it was this like great moment of like everyone not knowing what the hell was going on, but experiencing this thing that they've talked about for years, exactly in the way that that they talked about it, in a way, without knowing all the details. And so it was a fantastic kind of reenactment of a folkloric experience. So I'll move a little quicker now. I'll talk about one show that I've done at Gagosian and then kind of bounce through the others. This is the first show I did at Gagosian in the summer of 2014. It was called Clear. I came from Utah, and I was I was obviously incredibly informed about spirituality and never had it as a part of my own practice. And yet I'm always interested in aura and energy of this thing, this business we're in. I mean, it's like we put the cult in culture, you know, in terms of this kind of weird, you know, politics of value and relationships to creating crazy value, turning worthless into priceless, and canning shit and all that stuff. So I thought that it was an awesome opportunity for also to do something quite far out for Gagosian Gallery, was to make a show that was about spirituality, but like through primary entry of thinking about the light and space movement, this beloved art historical movement from Southern California that basically, like we have a fucking new Spider-Man film every year, there's a new light and space show every year, as if, you know, it's never happened before. It's always the same people, it's always the same story, materiality, translucence, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's pretty interesting from a kind of amnesia point of view, or senility or whatever. And so I thought, I'm going to do something else. You know, I want to think about what is this movement really about? It's the aesthetics of the out-of-body experience. I mean, if you think about what James Turrell, the extremes of James Turrell's research in like the anechoic chamber or his perceptual cells, he's really trying to create these disconnects between mind and body and create a total kind of perceptual situation that allows us to let go and actually have potentially out-of-body experiences. So I wanted to look at it as the aesthetics of the out-of-body experience, and in particular of astral, the aesthetics of astral projection, or set up this kind of conversation that would be about thinking about the astral plane. But of course, if you haven't caught it already, I mean, clear is a very loaded, very simple word in its idea, but you can load so many things into it in terms of glass, or clear mind, clear body, clearing customs. You know, there's all these notions of transference that are built into it. But of course, it's the first stage of enlightenment of Scientology. And so I thought it was my dream to do a show about Scientology. And so nobody knew that, and no one asked. But it was a show about Scientology, but seen through the lens of the light and space movement. But it was a much more complex thing than that. I don't want to say it was like this hack to do a show about Scientology. It wasn't really. That was one of the dimensions of it. The show was divided up into two galleries in our Beverly Hills space, and this one was about the physical body, this gallery, and the next space was about the astral body. So it was about this duality of sorts. And so this was a much more ethereal space that had moments of thinking about the body as immaterialized. And or this idea of total clarity, the idea of having full access to your brain, or the opening of the third eye. This idea of this piece from Julian Bismuth here against the far wall. We just left a 10 by 10 foot square of paint intact and then stripped the rest of the wall. So it's like this idea of seeing through the wall and seeing this perfect white square. But here's a nice third eye reference. The artist on the right is Ingo Swann, who was for me the real opportunity of this exhibition. Ingo Swann is one of the most famous clairvoyants in culture. He was a CIA experiment from the 80s, 90s. He was the one who gave us the term remote viewing, which was the CIA tried to harness the powers of psychic individuals and clairvoyance to create Psi Spies, X-Men. And so they spent about $10 million trying to deal with this potential technology that could then be used for espionage or warfare. And Ingo Swann was the face of it. He was the most successful case study that was going to offer them this opportunity to get the Russians. And because it was purported that the Russians were also engaged in a similar kind of research in designing psychotronic weaponry. And so Ingo Swann was the American version of that effort. And Ingo Swann, in his remote viewing history, was going behind the Iron Curtain to the moon, to Europa or Mars. Ingo Swann was an OT7, operating Thetan 7. He was the highest level of Scientology, and it's probably because of his background in Scientology that he was able to access his mind as well as he could. And so now I'll just skip through some stuff. This is a show I made in Athens, which is about erotic mysticism and the Kundalini awakening. It was called The Rainbow Serpent. I think this is the most far out show the gallery had ever done. This is a show I made last summer in Beverly Hills called Theories on Forgetting. It was about how cultural memory forgets. And again, I created a kind of a binary situation of reconciling the space between personal memory and collective memory, because that's probably where forgetting occurs, right? When the personal tries to deal with the entire collective, and the collective, picks up pieces of the personal. There's things that drop in between, and so the way that was represented was this gallery was the bedroom, which is where we kind of lay down memory traces for the day, expose ourselves to kind of TV news. There's a Katie Nolan there that's blurred for nobody's benefit. But it was a great metaphor for the show. You can't document these works of Katie Nolan, so you had to be there. Otherwise, it's not there. And then this was the metaphor for collective memory, which was the library or the archive. So there were a lot of works that were dealing with accumulation of knowledge and so forth. And each one had in it sort of built-in mechanisms of forgetting specific to whatever the artist's project was. This was a show about kind of a paranoia and abstraction called Horror Vacui. That's Urs Fischer wallpaper. Oh, wait. Oh yeah, sorry. That's Urs Fischer wallpaper there. Which was great because people thought that we had just had the sheetrocked walls going, and I mean now everybody wallpapers every exhibition, but like with this wallpaper, man, people were like, dude, you gotta fucking paint these walls. So the Horror Vacui idea was happening for people, it was so good, you gotta fill this space. And then this is a show I just closed in Rome called Prototypology, and it was all about about the research and development process that happens between bodies of work in an artist's practice, and all these moments, really trying to expand the notion of the prototype as not being this pre-finished product, thing, or a mutant, but really looking at even just the idea, the moment of conception, as a prototype, and all those moments following of the sketch to the maquette, the model, the prototype, and so forth. This is a tacky thing I'm going to tell you, but I had all these shitty metaphors in the show. We don't do didactic stuff at Gagosian. But the idea of conception was hilarious for me because I was about to have a baby when I was planning this show, and so there was one side of the room that was, this side of the room was about the bricoleur, the idea of the designer, the inventor, and this side was about the conception and the creation of a human being. Thinking about the human being, we're all prototypes. There's no universality to us. There's no anything that's consistent to any of us. And so we're all, in effect, kind of prototypes. So building a kind of idea around that either the specificity of object making for the individual or the individual itself as that specificity. And so anyways, this was kind of man and woman get married at the chapel. It's tacky. Terrible. No, but nobody knew that, you know. I don't have didactic stuff. But here's a great project in the show. This is Robert Therian. He gave me really, all these artists gave me backstage access to their practice. And this is a macro view of 40 years of work for Robert Therian, him tracing this form. You know, Therian's work is 15 forms. If you look at it over 40 years, it's just this continued obsession with 15 core archetypal forms, most of which are sourced from his childhood. And so this is the passage from the chapel to the oil can, where there's this moment at some point where this 2D chapel form that he's working with becomes the 3D oil can. And then the detail, and it's this is, it's out of focus, but this is like the first one from like early 1970. But the thing where this whole thing starts off is Therian drawing his hand as a kid. You know, he's doing these outlines of his hand. So it's this real kind of romantic relationship to a very specific form. Okay. This is tacky, but like you know, again, back to this idea of recursivity. I like this idea of when we think of, I make exhibitions that are really with simple titles ultimately, and I like to imagine that people see these simple titles and imagine they know what it is going into it, and they have this complex, you know, thing that's in front of them that actually kind of disrupts their idea of its simplicity, and it becomes a kind of maybe a defining visualization of whatever the meaning of that title is from there on. And so, but I like this idea of thinking about the title as this thing that when like we Google something, we expect that the results will look like this, but in fact they look something more like, more like this, and so this becomes this very kind of composite sketch of the nature of the subject. So this, I like diagrams a lot. They help me figure out ideas. I like to think of things on a spectrum because I don't think I try to not have anything literal in the work that I do. I think there's enough complex nuances in the world to avoid that. And so I try to think of this spectrum as being this kind of representational potential of the idea. And so this would be our spectrum for what I'm talking about here in terms of systems of belief. These are kind of rough categories I tried to think of in terms of maybe how we process these specific things, like an artifact becomes a folklore, becomes a truth, enactment becomes a pseudo-ostension, becomes a reenactment. Pseudo-ostension I'll explain in a little bit, and a placebo becomes epiphany, becomes dissociation. They're not really resolved as categories. The bottom one's probably the most unresolved. But anyways, it's a way to kind of come back to the point of the talk, which is, I'll try to make this quicker. I'm sorry, I'm at like 50 minutes. Are we okay? Is everything okay? Yeah? So I'm going to talk to you about 3 shows that really touch on this idea. I think that everything I talked about so far really touches on what has been my objective kind of anthropological lens of trying to create, self-sustained sort of cultural systems within respective contexts, and that become their own kind of cultural systems. But then there's this moment for me where everything kind of changes, and I lose my sense of self in my relationship to it, and that's where kind of participatory anthropology comes in. Is this kind of losing of your distance? I mean, because I think if I'm curating things anonymously, that's objective as you get. People don't see a person's name behind it. They can't claim authorship, and whatever. It makes sense. And so here we go. There's us. I made this show. That's it from overhead. It was an exhibition that was done in an undisclosed location. It remains undisclosed. It's a show that I made in Utah that I kind of believe came out of a midlife crisis. I was about to have a baby, and I was freaking out maybe, and I had all this energy around me where I was, and I wanted to make something of it. I was also dealing with this intense loneliness is the wrong word, but isolation, remoteness is the right one. I was doing all this work that you see, and nobody's seeing it. I don't have anybody coming to my museum. The local audience doesn't really care as much as I'm trying to make it about them or do it for them. Nobody gives a shit. And I don't care either. Actually, that was liberating. I was suddenly doing it for nobody, and that was like so awesome to not have to care anymore about whether anyone was getting it or not, because I knew the systems were there. And but it's like the spiral jetty or something. It's this thing that we all think of that's there remotely. It's an image that's clear in our heads, and yet we've never really been to it. So I was thinking about that kind of loneliness or isolation of an image or of an idea of a thing that's happening right now in this very moment. It's whispering in the wind. And I wanted to deal with that by making a show that no one was going to ever see anyways, because they wouldn't know where it is and they wouldn't be allowed to see it. And it was a show that would deal with all the specificities of that place, the brutality of that place. And what does it mean when context falls apart, when the power goes out? You know, all those climate-controlled museums are going to melt. And what's the first thing that's going to melt is the context. We will forget completely what those things are, and they'll become out-of-place artifacts quicker than you can guess. And already it's happening that museums, the modern museum looks like grandma's attic in terms of the perplexing quagmire of representing the spectrum of output that we're having and declaring qualitative importance of it. It's a undeniably pervasive and problematically untraceable provenance of details. And so I wanted to make something that that disregarded all of that. The climate control, the everything. What does it mean when context falls apart completely and on all levels? And so I engaged all of these artists to propose works that dealt with things that are about when context falls apart. You know, how that thin layer of civilization that we keep in play, that theater of social order that we are dealing with. You know, it's not so hard for me to flip this table. And so what I wanted was an exhibition that represented a lot of the things that I had as anxieties in my childhood that were like kind of Goonies-like explorations of lost cultural ghosts. I used to go into abandoned houses. You know, I wanted to find that haunted house, or that Satan worshipper's lair. You know, I wanted to find those things all the time, and I think that's kind of what I'm in this business for, is to find the magic. You know, and so I wanted to create that place. That was like the best way to maybe find it, was to make it. And so I got all these artists to make projects that were dealing with ideas of entropy as a structural kind of issue within the work. They knew that this show is still happening right now. They knew that, you know, that they're never going to get this work back, whatever it is. A lot of it was instructional or FedExed, but it's all there. And so it was things dealing with entropy or with cult or shaman-like activities. You know, the idea of when a civilization falls apart, new ones pop up, new orders of value pop up, and so yeah. And then so, anyways, but this show is only available on YouTube, and it's shot in, you know, like a handy cam. It's me walking through the show, but as if I'm the person that found this. And it looks like it could have been found on any given day, but of course I'm telling you it's the moment that we finished the show. I cleared it all out, and then I went and shot the film, and then we went and got drunk. But the view that you get is this kind of subjective / objective point of view. It doesn't allow any other interpretation of it or any other perception of it. It's only what I've given you. And I like that. I think that's a very special kind of control that no one's allowed to have anything other than that, because that's the problem with our business, is this multiple points of view of interpretation create a problem, you know, doubt or whatever, you know. So I wanted to see about like, if you will, even it's like almost like a totalitarian point of view, but give you one project from this, and then I'll move on to the next. This is a piece by an artist, Constant Dullart, we mentioned before, and but he, I thought, gave me the best idea, and I think it's the one that represents the project the best. Oh, but I didn't tell you. Shit, I should tell you the title. I love the title so much. Each memory recalled must do some violence to its origins is a quote taken from Cormac McCarthy's book, The Road. And it's this great moment in the book, which if you haven't read it, it's all like inner monologue. But it's this man trying to kind of bring his son through this savage wilderness that's the post-apocalyptic planet Earth, and bring him into hopefully a safe next civilization. And they're carrying the light. They are the civilized leftovers because everyone else has turned into cannibals. And he's constantly reminding his son about the greatness of human beings and all the beauty of the world that they came from that he doesn't remember because he was too young. And the father is just telling him all these stories of that world. And at a certain point, when the boy's sleeping, he's saying to himself in his head, you know, each memory recalled must do some violence to its origins. And it's that idea of through the process of remembering, we're actually forgetting. Every time you remember something, you're chipping away at the details. You're remembering it, you're shaving it down to a core archetype even at a certain point. And so I like this idea of that thinking about this show causes you to somehow destroy it, because it obviously doesn't look like it is in the film. And it is this thing that I've controlled the memory, so the memory is constantly present. But if you saw it in person, I mean, the building's fallen apart, half of it. And but it's nice to believe it's out there, whispering in the wind, I think. And the piece that Constant made, I think, is like this awesome meta work for the show. He asked me to buy off of eBay these Ming Dynasty souvenirs, like ceramics from maybe the Ming Dynasty Museum in China, and then I broke them and buried them. And so you had this sense that, oh, the Chinese have always been here, you know, if you found this, you know. Because that was the whole point, is this show was made for one person. It was the person who would discover it, and then it would become real. It's not for the art audience. There was no context for any of these objects in there. There was just this possibility that some highly religious child or boy or whoever would find this place, and it would be indelibly imbued with the most horrific magic that he had never imagined finding. And then it would become a cult phenomenon in the town or something like that. You know, that's my fantasy anyways. And that's kind of the idea of pseudo-ostension in a way. But I'll get into that in a minute. And now I'm going to talk to you about this project I did in Bulgaria, which was called Americana Esoterica. And I basically, this was another moment of a kind of a crisis for myself or something. It was carte blanche, basically. I was given carte blanche and no budget to make a show in Plovdiv, Bulgaria. And it was going to be sponsored by the US Embassy, and there was no control over what I was going to do. And so I did what I thought was going to be the weirdest fucking thing possible. And I'm obsessed with esoterica. I think esoterica is this last frontier of cultural language that is, you know, we are in a moment where the informational landscape is utterly flattened, and there's only a couple spaces where the unknown is hiding out, and they're getting thinner and fewer by the minute. And so it was a chance to explore this, celebrate this, because what is that? You know, it's if this is our known universe, this circle that I'm holding up is our known universe. My fingers represent the edge, the avant-garde, and then there's everything else, the unknown. But you know, it's probably a lot less than that, maybe. I don't know. But I like this idea of doing a show about the avant-garde. What does the avant-garde mean today, if anything, at all? As an experience, as an object. I mean, we're this culture that we sanitize and neutralize. The moment you call something an avant-garde, it stops being an avant-garde, because we've institutionalized it almost by naming it, and therefore it completely ceases to be. And so this was an exhibition that would be off in the middle of nowhere, that no one would ever see, that I was going to be able to, again, control all the details about it. And so I had a budget of originally $5,000 from the American Embassy. I raised another $10,000 budget. That had to also, you know, pay for plane tickets. I brought 3 artists over. and in production and shipping, but we made most of the stuff there. I wrote this text that was this really aggressive text, like a manifesto kind of text, that was a way to deal with like social cultural anxieties that I was feeling, that I think we all maybe might be feeling or something, but maybe not, who cares, that are about you know, the idea of a being annihilated by mediocrity. And so that was the purpose of the show, was that there was going to be this opportunity to create a cultural happening, to displace a religious awakening in Plovdiv, Bulgaria. And I rethought completely what I wanted as a press release and how I wanted to identify practices and artists. And so I looked at I had this shitty idea to think about it more like through a Hollywood trailer than a standard, you know, let's just explain what Americana Esoterica means. And so I identified the artists as Sterling Ruby was the shaman, Jennifer West was the alchemist, Mike Boucher was the mystic merchant, Jason Metcalf or Lazarus was the witch doctor, and Max Huber-Schneider was the mad scientist. And together, these fucking cultural superheroes were going to ward off this nuclear wave of mediocrity through this, what I was identifying as a number of really profound coincidences, conspiracies. I made a unified conspiracy theory, which that's a beautiful thing. Thinking about the language of esoterica, the language of esoteric thought, of discourse, is read through conspiracy theory, much like the language of art is read through critical theory. And I always liked this thinking about art, you know, as this like strange, you know, house of cards of discourse that, you know, can fall apart pretty easily if out of context, and how it has, you know, I think art, the art world, most closely resembles a cult structure in denial, and so I was like, fuck it, let's make a cult, you know, and so I used this language of conspiracy theory. There's 5 really intense conspiracies I've identified here that were very much of 2015, that if you were tuned in, you would be like, holy shit, this makes too much sense. And so we were supposed to have a near-Earth impact of a meteor, a Tunguska event, in September 15th or September 14th. Jade Helm was a military exercise that was happening throughout the western part of the United States, which, I mean, you should look all these things up. They're great. They're great fucking fodder for fantasy. And Bouvet Island, the NWO headquarters on Bouvet Island is genius. Look up Bouvet Island. It's the most remote island on planet Earth. And it's got one of the earliest web addresses for not having a population. And it's weirdly the source of 10% of all the cyber attacks. But nobody lives there. And it's, I think, easily a bond layer. You can't go there by boat. You have to be heli-dropped onto it. It's fantastic. It's a really special place. My fantasies all go there. And then the revelation of Roko's basilisk is just great. I mean, it's a modern day folklore that's about less than 10 years old. And I'll tell you that one. That's the most exciting one. That's the most kind of viable one of in terms of how a cultural sort of phenomenon happens. But Roko's basilisk is there's a community out there. It's based primarily in Berkeley. There that are like existential philosophers thinking about what's going to happen when AI really hits full speed, and what it's going to mean for us and them and all of that, and what that world will look like, and whether, you know, it's going to be a heaven or a hell, and, you know, it's all layers of thought and thought experiments in thinking about what the world with AI will be, and or artificial intelligence, and so there's this, and they're all like genius types that are like nerding out on this shit. And one day this guy Roko, nobody knows his last name. This guy Roko posts a question on this blog that is essentially saying that this AI, this utopia, this everything that you think it will be is coming. It's inevitable. And it will be this beautiful, benevolent thing that we want it to be. There'll be no work, and there'll be pure leisure, and it'll be the everything. But if you don't facilitate this thing from coming into existence, if you don't help this AI come into being, then it will go back in time and it will fucking haunt you and torture you for denying its being. And just by my telling you that story, you're making a decision of acknowledging and helping and facilitating Roko's basilisk, or facing the consequences of possible damnation, limbo, hell, all of that. Good luck. And so it's a basic Pascal's wager: believe in God, believe in Christ, go to heaven, don't go to hell. And it freaked out this whole community. People like depressed, a lot of these existential philosophers. And at the bottom, you see, Hail Roko. So I didn't have money to do advertising, and so I wanted to find a different way to mediate this thing. And so this is kind of where the participatory anthropology comes into play. I seem like somebody who can lose themselves pretty easily in their research. If you know me online, I'm pretty professional for the most part. I mean, I post these kind of generic things. But my topics, I feel, are pretty specific, cultural topics, that are, all like, come to the opening. And so I wanted to like experiment with what it might look like to lose my mind in public on social media, like commit an act of career suicide, and so yeah, it keeps going. Sorry. So I posted this, and not a big deal, maybe, but if you're Mormon and you read that, that's a pretty intense thing to say. Oh God, hear the words of my mouth is one of the top level statements you make in temple ritual, and it's not an okay thing to spread that, because these esoteric conversations, they rely on secrecy and religion or whatever, but I liked out of context how that might play out, me saying that. So I started posting all these things, which I thought were hilarious. But it really fucking, I thought at least like of my 3,500 friends on Facebook, of which I know 500, definitely one of them is going to believe I lost my shit and I'm going to like be a fucking shooter potential or something like that. I wanted to get fucking, blacklisted. I really wanted to see if anybody's listening or paying attention, what could happen if it looks like somebody's lost their mind in public in this way. And so then I'll show you quickly this.
Аран само накрая би направил пак отново.
Рокко. 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 I'm making an exhibition in Plovdiv, Bulgaria. It's the second biggest city in Bulgaria.
You are free to talk, sir. Mm-hmm.
And I'm doing an exhibition that is supported by the American Embassy there. It opens on September 11th, and it's called Americana Esoterica, and it's looking at esoteric phenomena in cultural practice in contemporary art.
Hi, my name is Moulton, and I'm the curator of the exhibition Americana Esoterica.
I'm looking particularly at Californian artists, artists from California or based here, working here, whose practices touch on ritual, magic, alchemy, fringe science, and things like that.
It's kind of an artificial movement of sorts to try to look at esoteric practices within visual culture.
The exhibition will be structured like a conspiracy theory from the voice of a kind of a paranoid prophet, and maybe acting like a bit like a hoax.
Maybe or maybe not a hoax.
I don't want to talk about that on camera.
So there's a lot of kind of veils of information there in terms of how we see a cultural practice, export a cultural practice, and then kind of mediate that cultural practice from afar, and it's all very self-conscious. We don't even talk about content anymore, it's all about packaging. It's classic in the 20th century to do this cultural export thing, you know, it's like a real colonial gesture, to be like, you know, the best art of America, and or whatever, you know, so I find that hilarious.
Americana Esoterica is really looking, I think, most simply at the avant-garde. What does the avant-garde mean today for visual culture and for contemporary art? Esoterica is really the kind of outer limits of cultural language. It's maybe the last kind of undiscovered or unknown kind of terrain that we have in our current informational landscape, which is ultimately very flat. I mean, it's fucking an insane reality that we live in now.
Paintings, installations.
It's going to be magic, superstition, religious revelations, and really the most avant-garde possibility you can imagine. Everything we don't understand. And we do believe in things like energy and magic and God and all that. So it's, you know, we have this fantastic ability to be irrational. I'm going to send the press release out here in the next day or two, and I'm hoping people are like, "Are you okay?" There's going to be a lot of site-specific work that we're going to make in Bulgaria. Artists in the show are Sterling Ruby, Mike Boucher, Jason Metcalf, Max Hooper Schneider, and Jennifer West. They all have very different practices, from, you know, dealing with the language of the folkloric, superstitions, literal mad science, and alchemical capitalism that single-handedly created religion and art. You know, doing this now today, what does this mean to do a show of American art in a place that no one's going to ever see it? You know, I'm going to have such a tight control over the mediation of it that it's going to be what I want it to be.
Do you have a crystal ball?
No, but I can sing a prayer for you. Should I do it?
Always prayer na molitwa.
Слушаме ви. Хел Рохко. Хel Rocco. Hel Rocco. I've said all that shit in the press release.
This is the CNN Doomsday tape that when Ted Turner went online on TV with CNN, it was like the network that was going to go until the end of the world, and they had a fucking tape that they were going to put on, like the last person in the office was going to put on TV for the last person watching TV. That was this. It's grim. So I had access to TV. That was pretty amazing. Which I think that's where this thing starts to lose control of itself, because you can guarantee there's somebody out there hailing Rocco right now that's fully out of context, saw my weirdness on TV there in Bulgaria, and is maybe, hopefully again, like my fantasy visitor to my show in the middle of nowhere, is praying to Rocco. This gesture is a very sacred gesture. It's a Masonic gesture that then the Mormons appropriate. And so when in the church, there's this kind of high up moment in temple ritual where they all say to each other, "Oh God, hear the words of my mouth. Oh God, hear the words of my mouth. Oh God, hear the words of my mouth." And so we just kind of hijacked it and then put the Hail Rocco into it. And that was a weird thing. This all was a nice kind of coincidence of momentum and snowballing of this project that we did this all on the plane. We were like, we need to have a fucking prayer handshake and all that shit. And I work very closely with an artist who, Lazarus, he's kind of like me, but as an artist. And we work really closely together, making ideas and work. and he's a former Mormon and a very special person, and we just kind of get it and vibe off each other pretty hard. But this show, I'm not going to show you a ton from it, but I'll show you some of the weird things about it. Buying billboard advertising in Bulgaria ends up being very cheap. It was about $200 for the printing and placement of this ad, and we did 15 ads all throughout the city. This is a project by Mike Boucher, and it's conspiracy theory, American conspiracy theory thrillers that you might buy at the airport, and no context. And so they're just suddenly popping up. It's election season in Plovdiv, and here at the, this is the fucking tourist info point. You have, I love this idea that people would look at it like this, but it's the American and Spy for God. Great. And then Der Auftrag is The Order from David Baldacci. This is the on-tape cover. And so none of these things had context. And mind you, like I said, this project was sponsored by the American Embassy. I proposed it as because they were like thrilled about my bio. It was for an arts festival happening there. But they were like, this will be a nice kind of high-profile moment for us to up our ante and the support we give to American art in Bulgaria. And the way I pitched this project, it was just Americana Esoterica, a contemporary art exhibition about artists from California. And I didn't give them anything. And because what were they gonna, they didn't need more info than that. And so then that was that. And then suddenly I'd spent that money right away buying plane tickets. So they then saw, I think, the press release, and then they started to see these ads popping up in town, and we're just like, holy, what did we sponsor here? It was intense. It was really intense because I'm really good at talking to people about art, and especially politicians. And I have a dream of hacking the right wing and becoming a culture czar, or if not, hopefully getting picked up by the CIA. And that was a kind of a part of this project, really, was to see if they're watching. This is a place where these people are actively playing their game still. There's Secret Service all over Eastern Europe, in particular this kind of southeast corner of the Balkans. And so, and I would say they were. I didn't get barred from any flights, but I had some very surreal occurrences there. I'm no BS. I outed a CIA agent at my opening. Two of them, actually. They were there as experimental filmmakers from some town no one's ever heard of, and they were trying to hit it off with me about contemporary art, and it was clear to me that they knew nothing about experimental filmmaking, and stuff fell apart really quick in a weird way that I just publicly outed them, and then they backed off and vamped out. But I did get followed for a whole night by this one guy who was the so mind you, I love this story so much because it's so problematically doubtable. But I was confronted by this guy who was an American guy, dressed like he was ready for an opening in the '80s, in the kind of a black jacket, black T-shirt, black pants, and his name was Ray, and I was ordering a drink at the bar, and he says something to me I was like, hey, can I get a beer? And I've been working on this show all week, and this guy, and so I know the people at the bar, and so I'm just like, hey, can I get a beer? And the guy at the bar says to me, blah, 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 and I was like, what? And then in perfect Bulgarian, he keeps repeating the same thing over and over to me. I was like, I don't know what you're saying, man. And he's like, I'm telling you how to get a drink, man, so you don't sound like such a douchebag, And I was like, oh, thanks, buddy, and then that was it. But then he came over, and then he was starting to make friends with us, and he kept persistently, and it wasn't it was kind of like, hey, we're both American, hey, what's up? But it was really suspect, and he was like, where are you from, man? And I was like, Springfield, Illinois. He's like, no shit. I'm from, and he seriously, no shit, stuttered for a minute. And then he said, Cook County Hospital. I'm from Cook County Hospital. And I was like, where's that? He's like, it's by Chicago, man. I'm like, oh, cool. And then he says to the person next to him, he's like, dude, me and this guy grew up next to each other. And I'm like, Springfield is 3.5 hours from Chicago, man. It's like, we grew up nowhere near each other. I'm sorry. It's like, cool, we're out here together. But it just kept kind of going on. And it was like, it was a suspicious thing that this guy's so fluent in Bulgarian and an experimental filmmaker. We're like, hey, man, me and Lazarus were like, dude, we're from Utah, Sundance Film Festival. What kind of festivals are you in, He's like, and then he starts describing to me some like experimental film stuff that he's involved in, which is like no shit verbatim, him describing to me a Jennifer West film, which we were showing at this cinema. And this was a beautiful Soviet cinema. I did not get good photos of it, but it's a huge, enormous cinema where everyone would see American films for the first time. And we showed Jennifer West films there, and whatever. And basically, we've tuned in pretty quickly, all of us, that this guy was not normal. He was a sore thumb. And Mike Boucher was like, that dude is fucking CIA. And I was like, you're so right. It happened, And so then I walk up to him when we're outside, and I was like, dude, is that for real? No, sorry. Here's the first thing that happened. The first thing that happened was I walked right up to him, faced this far away. I was like, you're CIA, aren't you? He's like, don't tell anyone. Quickly, right away, he's just like, don't tell anyone. Like, didn't miss a beat. And sure, he could have been an actor, could have been faking it, whatever. But he did not. I did not even finish my sentence. And he was like, don't tell anyone. And then I was like, amazing. And I'm not gonna lie, I was on MDMA. It all started to make too much sense. And it was amazing. It was like psychic shit happening. And so then I walked away, and I was like, dude, you guys are right. This was amazing. It's real. And so then the party kept going, and then I was building. I had an enormous amount of confidence at that point. So I walked right up to him around a lot of people, and I was like, dude, is that shit for real? He's like, what? Trying to play dumb. And I was like, black sites, MK Ultra, all of it, dude. You're fucking CIA. Your cover's blown, dude. And he was like. And he just like, it was like tunnel, dude. He like backed up and did not engage. I mean, everyone's watching us at that point, because I was kind of a celebrity on TV and shit at that point, and people were like very aware of this thing I just confronted him with, and he just backed up, backed away, and kind of stepped out of the periphery of the crowd, and vamped. But he ended up being with this person that was like a Bulgarian that spoke perfect English with a British accent, who ended up being the guy that followed me for the whole night, believe it or not. So this is Lazarus's work. Lazarus has a practice that is engaged in this word pseudo-ostension that I've been bringing up. He's a former Mormon. A lot of his work engages with the structures of religiosity and how things are imbued with religious energy, but then kind of broadening that into like general structures of superstition. He is indexical in his knowledge of the superstitious landscape and the objects and artifacts that come out of it. Things that we're not talking about your basic black cat. This is a farmer's almanac kind of predictions device. All these things, of course, play out very nicely as sculptural artifacts, and so these were all good luck sculptures or good fortune sculptures that he was dealing with. These are onions and egg yolks, and this is a way to tell if you're a farmer when the rainy season is going to be. So this is January, February, March, April, May. The yolk broke, so that May will be a rainy month. June, July, August is a rainy month. September is a rainy month. Blah blah blah. So it was a thing that if you're a farmer, you might have used to understand potential weather predictions. But what Jason's work is really about is this notion of pseudo-ostension, which, again, I'm sorry to keep asking, are we okay on time? I'll show Jason's film, and then we can either stop, or I can tell you about this project that I'm going to do in June, which is really a quick one to explain. But I'll show you Jason's film right now, just to give his practice a little justice, or Lazarus. He's changed his name recently. Please go full screen. The volume's not so good on this.
I found this text back in 2010. It's popular beliefs and superstitions from Utah. There's all these different superstitious beliefs broken down by different categories. Sayings after sneezing, legs, knees, and shins, fishermen, watches, purses, ghost stories. What I realized is that like some of these would really make incredible sculptures. There's one in particular, which was the first work that I made, which is if you place fingernails on the door hinge, it's a way to bring great wealth to your household. This methodology that I was using was this thing called the pseudo-extension. It's when somebody reenacts a legend or a myth and a third party witnesses that reenaction or that performative gesture becomes a point of truth for the third party. Like if you watch the news during Halloween, you always hear like check your kids' candy for drugs and razor blades and whatever. And that actually never happened until it was on the news. And so people heard that and then went out and then actually, created that scenario. Another would be like someone dressing up as Sasquatch and inciting a Sasquatch sighting, and then a third party witnessing that and believing that they actually saw the Yeti. If you look at Sasquatch sightings over time, historically, there was one in the 20th century that really invoked a lot of those sightings, and then the number really spiked. The same with UFO sightings, another 20th century example, and then after that, people really started reenacting that, and it really created these conspiracy theories. I'm interested in the formal qualities of these things as well, and how they function in a sculptural way. I'm making art, I'm thinking about that too. The pseudo-ostensive work has continually led me into other interests as well. And one thing you see a lot in superstitious belief is, well, what folklorists or anthropologists call it is sympathetic magic. And sympathetic magic is when you produce something that's similar to the result that you want to get great wealth, is to have a full jar of pennies in your kitchen all the time. And so if you think about the form of that, you'll always have money in your bank account because this jar of pennies is also full. So in a way, this object and the physical nature of it and the materials in it will actually produce a like occurrence. This abracadabra, it's a painting, but I'm also interested in it as a spell, in it functioning in a magical way as well as in a formal way. If you write this spell out, and then if you read it from top to bottom, if you're trying to get something to go away, then by the time you're done reading the spell, that thing will go away. And so, in a way it's about the ritual, but it's also the form of the text itself is mimicking what you're trying to get at. So this is another pseudo-ostensive work. It's if you put a rusty nail through a line, it's a way to ward off the evil eye. If you think about it anthropologically, it's rooted in this idea that we have a fear of technology, and so this practice comes from the advent of the Iron Age, because people started using rusty objects or iron to ward off evil as talismans. And that's another thing about superstitions, is that the form always stays the same, but the meaning changes over time. A lot of these beliefs, there is no concept of good or evil.
Are you religious? No.
And that's, so I'll just tell you really quickly about this show that I'm working on. It's really fast because I don't have anything. It's all proposal stage, but it's happening in June. This project in Bulgaria completely changed my life on a number of levels. Also for Jason and all of us there. I think we had what is defined as a conversion experience in some way. We found the magic that we were looking for. It was very bizarre. I don't know how to explain it without it, being something that's, going to dilute it. And not to say that I'm converted. I have a very good sense of distance from whatever that means versus the experience it was. And but it shifted my practice into a kind of a whole new place. So I kind of keep my day job as an objective anthropologist, and my night job is as a subjective, or like this kind of participatory one. So I wanted to think about these archetypal personifications that could, like, hopefully kind of create new frames for thinking about art. And which is no different than what I'm doing ultimately, is accessing these, enabling different aspects of visual literacy and outside of art history, because I just think art history is a broken device. And so I'm making a trinity of exhibitions that'll happen over the next 3 years. The first one is going to happen in June, and this is it. So yeah, it was like creating this kind of archetypal system, or my own kind of, I like the idea of folklore as an enduring language that will outlive the problem of this kind of cultural entropy that we're dealing with, of like all symbols are falling apart around us. Folklore, I think, will be the thing we come back to. It's like the most primitive, basic technology between us as beings, and our ability as storytellers, as human beings, is one of these kind of great gifts. And so yeah, I'm going to try to make a thing that will have essentials be, so what the whole thing about Americana Esoterica was, and its difference between maybe a basic objective anthropological study, was it wasn't an exhibition about esoterica, it was esoterica. It embraced this kind of recursivity of itself and became the phenomenon that it was purporting to be maybe about. It just was it, in fact. So I'm taking that model and doing that across these shows. So this diagram here is a kind of these core absolutes, and the first one will be about absolute evil, the boogeyman. And this is Omul Negru is the name of the show, and it's going to happen in this palace in Bucharest. And Omul Negru means the black man, or the man in black. It's how Romanians and Italians and Spanish people refer to the boogeyman, and or no, maybe it's just Italians and Romanians. And but I like how it's loaded. It's a very loaded term because it's I think the basic idea of the boogeyman, who's this fantastic antagonist in culture. I mean, he's the undying everything right now, especially when you think about like the idea of the boogeyman. You think about being a child or something in the fear of the dark. But if you think about it, the boogeyman is the everything right now. It's what makes me afraid that any of you have an open carry kind of gun in your pocket, and or that you could just be explode yourselves in front of me, or there's all kinds of ways in which the aesthetics of paranoia that have taken place in the 20th, 21st century have turned all of us into veritable boogie men or boogie people. But it is a man. Usually, and it comes from like a daddy complex or something, and so the idea of the boogeyman, I think, is super ripe, and it is the personification of evil, and it is a faceless abstraction of that personification. It could be anything and anywhere, and I want to make an exhibition that will be inherently and absolutely evil. So this is what the place looks like, and this place. I mean, it's a place where the aristocracy were. I mean, it's up until the communism, and it's a beautiful building from late 19th century. But during communism, the kitchen of this place was a hub where you see it there. There's a circuit board where hundreds of phone lines from a 10-mile radius, or whatever, a 10-block radius, excuse me, all filtered through this kitchen, and the secret police were sitting there listening to their fellow Romanians. So this is already two faces of the boogeyman: the aristocracy, or the dictator, or whatever, and the Secret Service. And then it's just this fantastic interior. And so then this is some of the art that will be there. That middle thing on the left is a drawing from my son, who's 3, who drew me a boogeyman without my even kind of putting it into his head. I don't even talk about this shit with him. And he suddenly comes at me with this drawing. He's like, Dad, he's 3 years old. He's like, it's 2 boogeymens without their noses. I was like, dude, you hit it, spot on. So, and I like the idea of having an innocence, the innocence in the show. I think it's an important starting point for the idea of the boogeyman. This is Richard Serra's only figurative work. That's of the Abu Ghraib guy, which is, of course, a poor person who was ritually abused by American soldiers. And of course, so he's not the boogeyman, but he represents the inherent boogeyman in all of us, how we all have this potential to be the boogeyman. And it's that kind of the idea in the Douglas Gordon work. So it will set up this spectrum that goes from all these capacities for evil. I will have John Wayne Gacy in the show. There's gonna be a painting of John Wayne Gacy. We'll have Ed Gein, Jim Jones, a lot of actual boogeymen. Damien Eccles, who was part of the West Memphis Three, from the moral panic, Satan worshipping scandals of the late '80s, alongside all these contemporary artists. And I think it'll be very special. I think it'll burn this building down in a very special way, because there's a church across the street where it's like, no joke, extremely religious, and they're not going to be okay with it. So, and I don't want to make fun of them by any means, but again, coming back to the idea of this thing becoming real, I mean, everyone asks me about when I do this show, we're doing things with this show. Lazarus is going to do a piece where we've bought the dirt from Ed Gein's house. Ed Gein, for anyone who doesn't know, is the inspiration for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Silence of the Lambs, and Psycho. He's one of the most important boogeymen, literally, in American culture. He's defined as a serial killer, but he only killed 2 people. He's really a body snatcher. He was a grave robber who would rob the graves of freshly dead corpses and then use their bodies to make lampshades, collect noses, made skin dresses, all that shit. And he was just a crazy person. And so he was arrested and died in prison in a mental institution. His house was burned down because it was believed to be evil. So I've bought dirt from the foundation of where his house stood, dirt from his grave, a picture of his gravestone, his fingerprints from when he was booked, glass from his house, a bottle cap that he probably touched, and his birth certificate and his death certificate. And Lazarus is going to summon him there for the opening. And so, I don't know. People are like, it's awesome, because, we're a bunch of atheists in the art world, but then you realize how people are actually superstitious. They're like, aren't you fucking scared of, like, the bad juju, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't know, this is the opportunity to find out, right? And so that's going to be one thing of the show. And I'll show you a quick little trailer for that, and then I swear that is it. It's a very, very quick trailer. So yeah, I don't have an outro. That's it. I'll thank you guys so much for listening for that long. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
You said that Homo Negro?
Negru.
There's a trinity.
Yeah.
What are the other two?
So the other two are, and they'll happen in this kind of order. The top one is that Z that you see is a symbol that nobody knows where it comes from, and it looks like it kind of comes from the Theban alphabet, which is a witch's alphabet for hiding spells, and but it was one of the ways in which the Zodiac killer would sign his letters to the police. And he was never caught, so he's this fantastic, like Jack the Ripper, this lore of a person that's still out there. And so then the top symbol is the Eye of Ra, or it's one of the oldest symbols, it's connected to the spiral, but it's most, I think, closely connected to the Eye of Ra, or even the meteor. And that is an exhibition that'll be kind of the, it'll be called the Basilisk, and that's trying to find an idea of universal aesthetics, looking at. I'll just leave it at that, and then the one on the right, which will happen, hopefully at a really nice institution here in LA, in 2018, is the psi symbol in Greek, and it's a symbol that at PSI it's used for paranormal representations, and it's the symbol I'm using to represent the Hierophant, which is the Hierophant is like the shaman, but it's more kind of bureaucratized within kind of religion, and or within kind of religious awakening, and the Epiphany is the revelation is revelation. Hierophania is identified by Mircea Eliade as the revelation of the sacred, and the Hierophant is the shepherd of those revelations. And so it's basically the idea of the romantic idea of the artist, is revealing the mystical and sacred. And so, so those are so it's like a kind of, man's fear of evil, pursuit of God and effort to be good. It's kind of 3 core kind of designs. Yeah.
What is that building in Bucharest? Is it only show art now, or is it multifunctional?
Yeah, there's a gallery here in LA called Nicodeme Gallery. They're right across the street from Venus over LA, and they have a base there in Bucharest. They've been working with people like Adrian Geni, or first people to show Cyprian Gaillard in LA. So they have a long-standing relationship to the kind of craze in the Romanian art market. But they have this gallery in Bucharest that they asked me if I wanted to do a show there, no strings, and kind of whatever budget. And so yeah, it's gonna be very special. And it's a building that they're gonna leave. Actually, they've been there for years, and it's gonna get remodeled, which could take 2 years in Romania. They said it'll take a year, but whatever. So there's all these secret rooms in the place, which is fantastic. And where the Ed Gain altar will be is in one of these secret rooms that'll be hidden by a painting from Mike Boucher. You'll have to pull this painting aside to gain access to this tiny little secret room that has a window that looks out onto the church. When you saw the palace, there's this point where the palace sticks out, and there's this huge tongue of an awning kind of thing. It's in that structure. So what'll happen is, because this Ed Gain stuff is not going to be sellable as art, I've asked that they'll seal up the wall when it's all said and done, so the people that then get this building afterwards will find this shit and have to figure it out.
Do you feel like you have a different or a transitioning role from your work, kind of compared to maybe like the more traditional curator in like the Salt Lake City Museum, sort of like an entity outside of the show, and now it seems like your work, you're very like intrinsically, I mean, at least with Esoterica, you're certainly really a part of that. But
I mean, that's the whole thing of like, with this participatory anthropology, whatever it means. I mean, it's not meant to be like, it's a play of structures and cultural structures. And so with the Esoterica show, I thought it was necessary to see what it would mean to sacrifice myself in the social media sense for the sake of the show, the believability of the show. I mean, I think that's the real key thing that I'm working towards with any subject is to make a structure believable. I don't know if I necessarily believe it myself, and it's not about me playing charlatan. It's about giving something the possibility of being believable, and sometimes it's necessary to put yourself on the line as a theoretical adherent to start that. It's like the pseudo-ostension idea. The witness of me on TV suddenly becomes the adherent of a thing that they don't even maybe know about, but it sounds pretty believable. And I don't think of it as of course, it's applying structures that we associate with like a hoax or trickery or something like that. But I don't believe in it like that. I don't think it's about some douche, hailing Rocco to his TV or something like that. I really believe there's magic that is easy to access through. It's psychological and ritual based in terms of how culture is formed, and we are engaged in that same magic in our business. We've just refined it to this degree that it's like, elitist kind of first world luxury art world stuff. So I don't know. I think it's a.
Do you see? I mean, because it seems like you're like allowed. Like, is there like, would you be able to do the same thing at the Gagosian Gallery, or like? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Does the space you're having the show sort of like create the show that you're kind of getting, or like?
I mean, I've arguably done the most religious shows that gallery's ever seen. With that Clear show and the Rainbow Serpent show, those are straight up religious shows. They're about religiosity and its, and aesthetics, and I can't believe they let me do them.
Yeah.
I like, that's a more complicated and actually quite simple conversation. But of course, I wouldn't hack that system. It's not in my interest.
Right.
Nor was it in Utah. In Utah, it's like there was all these limitations theoretically of what you could and couldn't do. There was like no penetration and no sacrilege. Well, I have no interest in that kind of art anyways, So it was more interesting to, rather than to swing right or left, to just be like weirdly ambivalent and let the viewer kind of figure out their place within it, yeah, definitely. I mean, this fact that it's in the middle of nowhere, I have total control over how it's going to be perceived. That's this more complicated aspect of what this whole research is for me is the total control of perception, where I think we're in this pseudo-democracy of everyone's opinion matters and criticality of reception and blah, blah, blah. I don't give a shit about that stuff. I could care less if you see what I do or not, and Utah taught me that, and that it was highly liberating to give up on that shit because I don't care. I don't get reviews for anything I do. I don't care about that. It's like I'm operating. I'm not, like I said in the beginning, I don't do this stuff for the art world. The art world's an excuse for me to do this stuff. And I don't think I can have this conversation with much of the art world. It's because it's a world made up of charlatans and skeptics and people that by telling them they're going to have an avant-garde experience will intentionally not have one. Out of principle.
Resist the they won't accept it or deny it.
Completely, and I think these audiences, these untested, uninitiated audiences, are where it's at. To find out whether or not anyone understands it as art, I could care less. It's
or its place in our history.
yeah, something like that. It's like there's so much more energy beyond that, and it's just about hacking or figuring out a bricolage kind of cultural structure to make it and communicate it, and yeah. Anyone else? Well, I thank you so much for having me. It was really a pleasure to test out this idea, and yeah, come to Bucharest.